Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing a story that you might have actually lived through yourself, and trust me, it's a love story. Are you ready? Let's go! She was 61 years old, standing alone in her wine shop on the stormiest night of the year, when a soaking wet 29-year-old man walked through that door and stopped her heart completely. And what he was hiding underneath that wet coat was a secret so profound that this woman would never be able to look at love the same way again. Girls, I have to tell you something I came across recently, and I swear I have not been able to stop thinking about it since. You know how sometimes you hear a story and it just stays with you, sitting right in the middle of your chest like it belongs there? That is exactly what happened to me when I read about this woman named Margaret. Margaret was 61 years old, living in Napa Valley, California, and she had spent the last 6 years running a beautiful little wine shop called the Golden Vine on her own. And she had opened it with her late husband, Robert, back when they were both still full of dreams and laughter. But Robert passed away from a sudden heart attack when Margaret was only 55 years old. And from that day forward, she carried the shop, the memories, and the loneliness all by herself. The town loved her, the regular customers adored her. But at the end of every single evening, when she locked that front door and walked through the back to her small office, the silence was so heavy it was almost unbearable. Now, Margaret was not a woman who complained. She was the kind of woman who wore her pain quietly, like a coat she never took off. She had convinced herself years ago that her chapter of love was finished. She was 61. She had already lived a full life. What more could possibly be coming her way? She poured herself into the shop, into the wine selections, into learning everything there was to know about every bottle on those shelves. That was her world. That was enough. Or at least, that is what she kept telling herself every morning when she looked in the mirror. Then came that November evening that changed absolutely everything. It was a Thursday, and the storm that hit Napa Valley that night was the worst one the town had seen in years. The rain was coming down so hard you could barely see 2 feet in front of you, and the wind was rattling the old wooden windows of the Golden Vine like it was trying to get inside. Margaret had already sent her part-time helper home early because the roads were getting dangerous. She was alone, organizing the back shelves, thinking she would close up within the hour. When the front door swung open with a gust of cold November air that made every candle on the counter flicker at once. And there he was. A young man, soaking wet from head to toe. His dark hair was plastered against his forehead. His jacket was completely drenched, and he was holding a torn map in one hand and a completely useless broken umbrella in the other. He looked like the storm had personally decided to target him and only him. He was tall, with broad shoulders and kind brown eyes that somehow managed to look both embarrassed and exhausted at the same time. He glanced around the shop like he was not sure he had walked into the right place. He said his name was Daniel. He was 29 years old, and he had just driven 4 hours from San Francisco for a job interview with one of the larger wineries in the valley. His GPS had failed. His phone battery was at 3%, and the storm had turned what should have been a straightforward journey into an absolute disaster. He asked if he could possibly use her phone to call his contact at the winery, and maybe wait out the worst of the rain. Margaret looked at this completely drenched, completely lost young man standing in the middle of her shop dripping water onto her hardwood floors, and she said, of course. She handed him a towel from the back. She made him a cup of hot coffee, and while he was on the phone sorting out the situation with the winery, she watched him from behind the counter and felt something she had not felt in 6 long years. Something she could not name right away. Something warm and unexpected that settled in her chest like the first sip of a really good red wine on a cold evening. Daniel ended up staying for 2 hours that night. The storm outside showed no signs of calming down, and Margaret found herself not wanting it to. They talked the way people talk when they are strangers, and somehow also not strangers at all. He told her about his passion for wine, how he had studied viticulture and enology for years, how he had worked his way through every level of the industry from the bottom up because he genuinely loved it, not just as a career, but as an art form. She told him about Robert, about the Golden Vine, about the particular way the morning light hit the vineyard across the road in early October. And Daniel listened, not the way young people sometimes listen, half distracted and waiting for their turn to speak. He actually listened, leaning forward with his elbows on the counter, his eyes steady on hers. Before he left that night, he looked around the shop one more time and said, "This is one of the most beautiful places I have ever been in." And then he looked right at her and said, "And I mean the whole thing. The wine, the atmosphere, everything in it." Margaret felt her face go warm in a way it had not in years. He came back the next morning to thank her properly and to return the towel. And then he came back the morning after that with a bottle of wine he had picked out specifically for her, a small producer from Sonoma County. He said she probably had not heard of, but absolutely needed to try. As it turned out, the winery had offered him a position. He would be in Napa Valley for at least a year. Over the following weeks, Daniel became a quiet and consistent presence in Margaret's world. He would stop by the Golden Vine on his days off and help her rearrange the display cases or fix the sticky drawer behind the register that she had been meaning to deal with for months. They had long conversations about wine, about loss, about what it meant to build something with your hands and your heart. Margaret tried more than once to remind herself of the obvious. She was 61. He was 29. She was his elder by more than 3 decades. Whatever this warmth was that she felt around him, she needed to keep it exactly where it belonged, which was firmly inside a box labeled "Things that are simply not possible." But Daniel, it turned out, had his own quiet secret. And one rainy afternoon in December, sitting across from Margaret in the back room of the shop with 2 glasses of that Sonoma wine between them, he finally told her. He said that he had spent most of his adult life feeling completely invisible to the women he actually wanted to connect with. Not because of his looks or his career, but because of something he carried inside him, a depth of feeling that most people his age found overwhelming or strange. He had been called too serious, too intense, too old-fashioned in the way he thought about love. He had stopped trying. He had decided at 29 years old that the kind of connection he was looking for simply did not exist for someone like him. Margaret sat very still and very quiet while he talked, and when he finished, she looked at him and said, "I stopped believing too. I stopped at 55, and I told myself it was the right and sensible thing to do. And maybe it was. But I have to be honest with you, Daniel. And sitting here with you these past few weeks has been the first time in 6 years that I have felt like myself again. Not the widow, not the shop owner, just myself." What followed was not something either of them had planned or even fully understood at first. It was slow and tender and completely unlike anything Margaret had imagined for herself at this stage of her life. There were long evening walks through the vineyards when the light was turning gold. There were Sunday mornings at the farmer's market picking out produce together like it was the most natural thing in the world. There were moments of laughter so genuine that Margaret would catch herself mid-laugh and feel almost startled by how good it felt to be this happy. The town noticed, of course. Some people raised their eyebrows. A few of her older customers made comments that were not exactly kind, but Margaret had lived long enough to understand that other people's discomfort with your happiness is absolutely their problem and not yours. And Daniel, for his part, had never once made her feel anything other than fully seen and deeply valued. I think about Margaret often, girls. I think about the version of her that stood alone in that shop night after night, convinced that her best days were behind her. That love was something that had already happened to her and was not coming back. And then I think about the version of her that walked out into the Napa Valley sunshine on a Saturday morning with a 29-year-old man beside her, laughing at something he had just said, completely unbothered by who was watching. The distance between those two versions of the same woman is not time and it is not age. It is one stormy Thursday evening and a front door that opened at exactly the right moment. I am not telling you that love follows a schedule or that it looks the way you expect it to look. I am telling you that Margaret was 61 years old and she thought her story was finished. And then it turned out she was only just getting to the part that mattered most. Some of the best chapters begin with a storm. Girls, if this story touched something in you today, I want you to know that you are not alone in feeling it. So many of us have been where Margaret was, standing in the quiet of our own lives, wondering if warmth like that is still meant for us. I believe it is. I truly do. If you want to keep hearing stories like this one, stories about real love, unexpected beginnings, and the courage it takes to stay open, please subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss one. and leave me a comment below. Tell me what part of Margaret's story stayed with you. I read every single one, and I love hearing from you. I will see you in the next story, and until then, keep your heart open. You never know what might walk through your door on a stormy night.